You're listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport Media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
I want to introduce to the program and first-time guest to the Final Say Radio Show with Brett and John Rappaport. Dr. Gerard Gianoli is practicing medicine in the great state of Louisiana, and he's got a wealth of experience. And you're going to have to tell us a little bit about your former practice, because I see it is very rare, and I'm not even 100% certain exactly what you do, but I do have to say, anytime, and I'll call you an entrepreneur in this case, comes up with innovative and creative ways of dealing with a system that has just gone crazy. And there's a lot of blame. It's not just the politicians. I mean, you could blame the insurance companies. You could blame the American citizen and taxpayer for allowing it to get to this point. Because, hey, we vote people into office, and we use insurance companies, and we suffer the system, if you will. But welcome to the program. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much, Brett and John. It's a pleasure to be here. And you're not the first person to not know what a neuro-otologist does. As a matter of fact, my wife's a gynecologist, and when I told her I was doing a fellowship in neuro-otology, she said, "God bless you." That was a little joke, but but no, it's a subspecialty of ear, nose, and throat where we deal with just inner ear and skull base surgery problems, and most of our patients have deafness and dizziness as the two big things.
Well, that's interesting, and well, I'm sure you have a lot of people who experience issues in that area. I mean, and so it's very interesting. But so let's start with this, and then we can get into some of the major problems. But first, if you can, you started this long before the Affordable Care Act came into place. So you must you must have seen this coming. And well, why wouldn't we have seen for, you going back to Hillary Clinton? So you take it upon yourself to come up with creative ways of handling your practice. And so I'd love to hear about that. And then also, then we could start the conversation of how that has prepared you to endure the pains of the Affordable Care Act.
Well, my history is kind of interesting. My formative years were spent as an associate professor at Tulane Medical School, and I practiced medicine there completely oblivious of all the healthcare things that we're dealing with right now. And it wasn't until I went into private practice in year 2000 that it hit me smack in the face, all the issues that most of the doctors are dealing with. And looking at it objectively, both my partner and I realized this is getting bad and it's going to get worse. And the only way we can continue to do quality medical work and get paid a reasonable price is to completely get out of the system. And so in 2005, almost 10 years ago, we got rid of our last insurance plan. So for the last 10 years, we deal exclusively with our patients. When they call our office, they're told, okay, it's going to cost between this and this for you to see Dr. Gianoli. We give them an estimate over the phone. And when they come in, they will pay the amount that we told them on the phone. In turn, they get a HCFA form, which is sort of like a receipt. The patient then submits that to their own insurance company. And the insurance company, instead of reimbursing me as the doctor, they reimburse the patient. And how much the patient gets charged from one to the next, I charge the same price, but the patient's reimbursement will vary according to how good their insurance is.
Right. Well, that's very interesting. And I just want to mention two things here. And John and I happen to, within our family and just friends and people we know a lot of different types of doctors and even dentists, and psychologists, there's psychiatric practitioners, therapists, and everybody has a different process. But there's a commonality that they all have, and especially people who are getting closer to retirement age. They are struggling with their practices, if they still have one, because of the reduction in payments they receive from insurance companies or from Medicare, Medicaid, and wherever else the sources. And the amount of time spent being compliant with the paperwork, which instead of actually doing what you're supposed to do, you're a doctor seeing your patients and looking after their care, you become a paperwork person. Like you're a clerical worker and then a doctor. And it's really crazy. And so, but I also want to say this. I worked for an accounting firm for many years, and I'm an entrepreneur as well, and John and I have been involved in radio for some time. And when I got into this full time, I left the practice, and so for a small period of time, I did not have health insurance. But what I did have was a checkbook, and I had absolutely no problem calling up my doctor and saying, I'd like my yearly physical. How much does it cost? And they would tell me, it's $250, and if we need blood work, this is what the blood work is. So you go in there, you write the check, and, it is what it is. So I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with a system like that. And then I throw in the problem with the Affordable Care Act, where now all of a sudden, if I kept up that procedure, which I don't, I now have insurance, but I would be fined in some manner by the Internal Revenue Service.
Right.
How the Internal Revenue Service gets involved in the relationship between myself and my doctor is beyond me, but that's where we are.
It's pretty insane. Well, the interesting thing is, even now with you having insurance, you would actually probably do better in some cases, in a lot of cases, by not using your insurance. And I'll give you a good example. My wife had a mammogram done just recently, and we have a $10,000 deductible, and we actually have a special kind of insurance that I think we need to talk about too. And as she goes to have it done, she mentions to the lady, why don't I just pay you now the cash price, because our deductible is so high, it's not going to cover anything. And they convince her to, let's just file your insurance. Okay, fine. So she has her mammogram done. A month later, we get the bill, and it's for $350. Well, with the insurance discount, it was about $250. But if she would have paid cash in advance, it would have been $90. And if she would have gotten it done during Breast Cancer Awareness Week, it would have been $40 to $50. So we would have done better, not even mentioning that we have insurance. And that's how crazy the system is. And that's true for a lot of the things you deal with in medicine. For my practice in particular, patients that pay cash, all the patients pay us cash, but they're going to spend less money than what's charged by my competitors. And it's because we don't have to deal with this promise of being paid down the road. The radiology units, they'd rather get their $50 to $90 in cash up front than a promise that they might get $250 a month or 2 months later.
Yeah, Jerry, one of the things that I always look at with any legislation is who are the winners and losers if this legislation passes. And forget the fact that Brett and I actually have pictures of us standing in congressional offices with stacks of paper that are ceiling height of what that bill actually looks like if you print it, and then you print the related documents that it pertains to. Because if you've read any part of the bill, it's not just it's not just the pages in the bill; it's all the other things that it points to. But when you think about the people who don't seem to be complaining about this, besides big government advocates who, the nanny state folks, big hospitals don't seem to care. Big insurance doesn't seem to care because they seems like they're perfectly covered here. Nor do the lawyers seem to care. And I want to go to big hospitals real quick because, to a comment Brett made, the vast majority of the doctors that I know, friends and family, as well as many people, including 14 congressional doctors Brett and I have been privileged enough to speak to, all on at least one occasion, have all pointed out the fact that the private practitioner is being squeezed out, because even if they make an attempt to, the ability to keep up with the processes, the regulation, etc., is such a big burden that for most of these guys, it makes sense to simply bend to the inherent will of the system and to fold their practice into sell their practice or go out of practice, retire early, or simply start working for one of these big hospital firms that doesn't seem to care. So I want to get your take on that. And then conversely, who are the people who are against this bill, and who you think those people are?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And let me give you some numbers to fill in your feelings about this. There was there's a biannual poll done by the Physicians Foundation that just came out at the end of 2014, and there's some staggering numbers in there. In the year 2008, 6 years ago, over 2/3 of doctors were private practice owners. In the year 2014, it's down to about 1/3. So we've seen a tectonic shift in how doctors are practicing medicine, and it points exactly to what you've mentioned. The doctors in private practice, basically, they can't make it because they're getting reduced payments and they're getting increased regulatory burdens and increased overhead. A lot of times patients say, "Oh, look, the doctor, the doctor billed $1,000, and I paid the doctor $1,000." But what they don't realize is it may have cost the doctor $1,100 to provide that service, in which case the doctor just lost $100. And so there's a lot of guys who they've been driven out of business, and what they've done is the vast majority have become employees of hospital systems. Now, the reason the hospitals aren't complaining is because more doctors working for them means more patients come into their hospitals. And the interesting thing is, the way the system is set up, Medicare as well as insurers pay things that are done in the hospital approximately 30% more than that same service provided in a private practice setting outside the hospital. So the hospitals, this is a huge boon for them. The other group that it's a huge boon for is the insurance industry. They're getting all these patients that are being sent to that have to have insurance, so they're making money hand over fist. All you have to do is look at the stock market and the price of the stock for all these insurance agencies. As far as who loses, the two groups that lose are the doctors and the patients. The doctors are losing because they're losing autonomy. They now have an extra boss in the system, in addition to having that unholy triad with the patient, the insurance company, the doctor. Now they've got this other layer of the hospital directing them as well, so they've got an extra boss, and they feel just completely stifled. I have to admit, I feel very sorry for my colleagues who've had to sell out and become employees of hospitals. But the other person that loses is the patient. The Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, what it was supposed to correct was it was supposed to increase access to care, and it was supposed to reduce cost. It's done neither. It's actually made access harder and increased cost. What Obamacare has done is it's taken a bad system and it's magnified the bad things about that system. And that's what's leading to what we've got now.
So you think future doctors will have to replace the Hippocratic Oath with a new oath that somehow, pays allegiance to big hospital, big GovCo, big pharma, big insurance, and forget that old doctor-patient relationship?
Yeah, well, if you look at it right now, the third-party system where the doctor's got a contract with the insurance company and they're being paid by the insurance company, and they've got the patient coming in, that's that third-party system. And it is, if it was in any other industry, it's considered a conflict of interest and it's illegal. You're being paid by one group, but the other group is the one receiving your service. So in essence, you have two bosses, and who are you going to listen to? The one that's demanding the services or the one that's paying you? And now throw on top of that, you're becoming an employee, and you've got the extra boss who is the hospital, and the hospital is saying, "Doctor, you spent 8 minutes with that patient, you really should be only spending 7 minutes." I know people are going to find this crazy, but the administrators are actually in the hospital clinics with stopwatches measuring how much time the doctors are spending with the patients. Because time is money, and the hospital is the one that's reaping the benefits on that.
It's actually terribly frightening. Again, going back to the entirety of medicine is nothing more than a patient-doctor relationship. Now, the only real reason for an insurance company, in my opinion, is to protect individuals from surprise, catastrophic expenses, or to put people in a position where they have to choose death because they can't afford the cost of life. So where do you see the resolution between that need dissolve to fill that gap and the sort of cash-based practice that you were operating?
Well, I am in total agreement with you. That is what insurance should be. It has morphed into a prepaid healthcare system. If we took the analogy and looked at the automobile insurance industry, it would be the equivalent of saying, okay, I'm going to pay for my insurance, and it's going to cover my gas and my oil change and the car wash, et cetera. All the things that you're going to have to pay. So the only way the insurance company is going to make any money on that is if they charge more than what they're going to have to pay for your gas and your oil and your car washes, et cetera. So it raises the prices of that. The way the system is set up, however, is, because you've got this bottom dollar coverage, there is no restrictions on patients going to see and take care of everything. And so consequently, if someone, even if you had a nominal fee of like $100, that would restrict a lot of people from going to take care of things that is not worth it for them to take care of for $100. The patients have to have some skin in the game. That's the only way the system is going to put any kind of brakes on, and that happens in the third-party free system. Like myself, I've had patients who have called. They've asked, how much is the appointment to see Dr. Gianoli, and I was there one time, and my ladies told her $300 for his office consult, and the patient said, well, my dizziness is not worth $300, and so she never made an appointment. And in that particular situation, it made sense for her because it was not worth $300. But if someone's really severely affected by dizziness, $300 is a bargain price. But I don't want to be taking care of patients who really aren't that invested in getting better. I want to take care of sick people, not people that don't consider $300 worth their investment. So I have to admit, I forgot the begin. What was your question, or did I answer it?
Well, you basically did answer it, but you left a part open, which is that, to me, again, the biggest risk is this big payment, right? I don't see any need for insurance for the sniffles and the hundreds of little appointments that you make where you can drop all the cost and complexity out of the system. All I really see a need for insurance is to prevent people from losing their home, losing their life savings because of some kind of a catastrophic accident or illness. And I don't really see any other reason for insurance in general.
I totally agree. One of the problems too is the charges for any kind of hospital-related visit or surgery or hospital stay have gotten ridiculously exaggerated because of the third-party payment system. Right now, Medicare has been publishing how much they pay to doctors, and that hit the New York Times recently, but they've also published how much they're paying to individual hospitals. And recently I pulled this database up, and it's interesting to see how much the hospital would charge for a typical, we call them DRGs. It's diagnostic-related group. It's kind of a one price for all. And how much the hospital charged versus how much Medicare paid them. And it's typically somewhere between 10 to 1. And the cash price, if you negotiate in advance, would be more like the Medicare amount. So for something that they may have charged $100,000 for, Medicare's not going to pay them $100,000. They're lucky if they get $10,000. A good example is my dad had an angiogram with 3 stents placed, coronary stents. A few months later, he spent the night in the hospital and got out the next day. A few months later, he calls me terrified because he got the bill. And I'm like, Dad, calm down. You've got Medicare. I'll look at it at the end of the day. So I get there, and sure enough, they had charged him $100,000 for his stay for the angiogram and the 3 stents. But Medicare had written off $99,000, and they paid the hospital $1,000, and my dad owed $0. Now, the $100,000 charge is ridiculous. However, the $1,000 reimbursement is also crazy, too, because each one of those stents cost about $1,000. So the hospital lost money on my dad. A reasonable price for that would have been somewhere around $5,000, $6,000. But we've got this crazy pricing system, and if we could make it illegal for doctors and hospitals to have contracts with insurance companies, you would see all this crazy pricing go away. You'd see competition in prices for different things. As a matter of fact, all you have to do is look at ophthalmology and refractive surgery and plastic cosmetic surgery. Cosmetic surgery and LASIK surgery, those prices are set by the market. And in the last 10 years, the prices have come down even though the quality has gone up. And it's because you've got no insurance involved, no government involved. And so that's really the solution to the whole problem. Just divorce the insurance industry from the healthcare system, and you would see prices drop.
Yeah, that's an excellent example, by the way. So, Doctor, I want to step back and look at one other thing that, unfortunately, and we both alluded to it, or the three of us have alluded to it throughout the discussion, but ultimately, you have a patient and a doctor relationship. And I think that's almost been completely lost. And I'll tell you why. If I go back years ago when I had my another business and I had insurance for myself and my employees, I had the top policy you can get, and meaning that the co-pays were, I think they were like $5 and $10. The deductible was, I think, like $500 a year. I mean, it was like everything was covered, and there wasn't, you couldn't go to this doctor. Everyone was in the plan. It was just wonderful, and it wasn't cheap, but it wasn't completely off the wall. And then I recall at a certain point, the policy started going up like 10 or 15% every year for a handful of years. So you got to a point where you had to start increasing your co-pays and things like that. But now what I've seen are the policies have astronomical out-of-pocket charges and deductibles and high co-pays, like if you look at the bronze plan or the silver plan or whatnot. But they're still going up at these very high rates every year. And so I just don't see how that's helped anyone. But then I've also, as you have, read the studies of people who make choices not to go have something dealt with medically because they may not have the $100 or the $150 to pay for even just minor things. And so they let things go, which could spiral into something more serious. And
I have a solution for you.
It's the erosion of the relationship where maybe I can come visit you, give you the $50 or whatnot, and you could say, you know what, it's really nothing to worry about, you're okay. Or what happens to the time where you go to a doctor and they say, we have to do further tests, you may have cancer or heart issue or something like really serious here.
Well, I have a solution for you. First of all, there's two different resources I would point your listeners to. First is the Association of American Physicians and Surgeons, their website, which is aapsonline.org. They have a database of cash-based practices across the country. And in those practices, you're going to find significantly lower charges than anywhere else. Okay, that's the first. The second one is something called MediBid. And MediBid is an organization, believe it or not, started by an insurance guy and a Canadian radiologist. This Canadian radiologist was fed up with the Canadian system and saw the American system going crazy, and he was trying to be an innovator himself. And what this site is you log on, I think it's a $25 charge for the patient, and suppose you need to have a CAT scan done of your neck or your knee or whatever. You just say, I need a CAT scan of my knee. This is what my doctor told me I need. Give me a cash price. And the radiology units will bid for that service so that you will be getting the lowest price for that particular service. Now, granted, you can't do that for an emergency, but for most stuff in medicine, it's not emergencies. Most are planned events, quality of life type issues that you do have time to investigate beforehand. And so, dealing with the cash-based practice beforehand, you're much better off with those prices. Now, on the insurance side, right now, the insurance premiums, as you alluded to, are just crazy ridiculous. a neighbor of mine has a policy from one of the well-known insurance industry giants, and they have 6 members in their family, and they have a $10,000 deductible, and their premium was going to be $1,700 a month. So you're talking about just a ridiculous amount of money outlay before the insurance company even pays one dime of their expenses. I can't tell you how much cash-based medicines you can get for all those prices. Now, similar policy through one of these medical ministries, you can get significantly lower. I have a family of 5. We have a $10,000 deductible for our plan. It's not considered insurance, but it functions like a major catastrophic plan, and I pay $280 a month. So it's similar to the one that my neighbor's paying $1,700 a month. And so that's much more affordable for most people, and it's exempt from Obamacare, which is one of the reasons why it's much less expensive. It does not have all these crazy mandates for things that people know they're going to have to buy, or it's an elective thing that they want to buy, whether they want to have, Viagra or whatever, it's not going to be covered by the insurance. I mean, that's something you can do or you cannot do, but it's basically the healthcare ministries. It's a cost-sharing program, and it's only for major medical problems.
Yeah, and thank you for that information. That's wonderful. And, in your case, you could set up health savings accounts or even just a regular savings account, and you can almost self-insure because if you're not using medical care, then you're just saving up and accruing money in whichever account you're doing it in. And so in the event that you do have something catastrophic, if it were not to be covered, you'd have some amount of money there, and whether it's you or anyone else. And I think that's a great idea. And quite frankly, the reason that we all pay so much more are for the people who, in some cases are irresponsible, or those people who aren't supposed to be using our system that do, or sometimes you do have people who just, no fault of their own, face issues that mean that we should blow up an entire healthcare system to deal with a small percentage of people. And that's exactly what they did here. They destroyed an entire industry.
One of the things that's always really upset me is the way they painted health insurance or equated health insurance with health care, which is so not true. Back when they talked about the 40 million people without access to health care because they didn't have insurance, was complete nonsense. No one in the United States of America goes without health care, even people that don't have insurance. Doctors, every single doctor in this country has provided free health care to people without insurance. They do it because that's why we went into medicine. The doctors want to help people, and just because they don't have insurance and they don't have a means to pay, they will get taken care of. Of course, it's nice to be paid for your services, but there's no such thing as someone not getting health care. And any story you see where they talk about somebody not getting health care, I guarantee if you investigate it, it's a complete nonsense. If you go back and look at when they talked about 40 million people without insurance, that was an overly inflated number as well. Half of the patients, or half of that 40 million or 20 million, were people that were between jobs, usually just about 3 months, and they were able to buy insurance through COBRA if they needed it. The problem is the way COBRA is set up, you don't have to get it unless you know you need it. So you've got up to 3 months to buy that COBRA, and you can get it retroactively. So why would you buy the health insurance if you're not sick during that time? You wait until you need it, and then you buy it retroactively. So 20 million people that, quote-unquote, did not have health care really did have insurance if they wanted it. Of the other 20 million, about 10 million of those folks were people that qualify for Medicaid, but they've never applied for it because they didn't need it. They weren't sick. So they would have gotten health care as well. And the other 10 million, the last group, the vast majority of those people are illegal aliens. And those people get health care as well. They just show up into the emergency rooms, and we take care of them as doctors and hospitals and nurses do. So it was just a complete sham what they were talking about.
Well, again, healthcare is not a statistics game. It's a relationship between a doctor, a patient. It's also a relationship between a patient and taking care of their body, but that's a whole other story for another discussion. Dr. Gianoli, I thank you so much for the time you spent today. I do want to ask before we let you go two things. One, where can our listeners find more about you? And one question we forgot to ask is, what is Doc Squads? I understand you're a member of that.
Sure. Doc Squad, it's a loose group of, I guess we've got about 40 or 50 of us now around the country who are basically going out here writing editorials and doing radio interviews to let the Americans know how bad Obamacare is and that it really needs to be just put away and put out of its misery. As far as where people can reach me, my website is www.earandbalance.net. They can also find me on Twitter, and it's Gerard Gianoli, GerardGianoli. And on my Twitter account, I've got links to those other websites we mentioned earlier, the AAPS, cash-based practices, and also MediBid.
Yeah, Doctor, I just wanted to mention to your one of your points, when I was working in the accounting practice, I was still there when Katrina happened, and we did a handful of tax returns, even up in New Jersey, for people from Louisiana who were impacted there. And it was free of charge, and it's just like anything. Somebody needs help, you give them help. It's what you do. And, you know, there's always some percentage that you do for charity or for free or whatever, and that's what makes this such a great country. So, again, John and I appreciate you coming on. I'm sure the people, you know, in your state and where you practice appreciate what you're doing, and also the innovative ideas that you're setting out there and really putting a working model for other doctors to follow. So, again, thank you very much, and we look forward to being able to speak with you again in the future.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Okay, take care. Have a great afternoon and a weekend. Bye.